It started with a whisper. Not a headline, not a scandal, just a single casually delivered sentence during a press panel. And yet, within hours, it had ignited the kind of digital wildfire usually reserved for the most explosive celebrity meltdowns. Angelina Jolie, known for her cool composure and carefully curated public image, had dropped a line so sharp, so perfectly timed, it pierced the Hollywood bubble like a pin to a balloon. The quote, "Some people try on legacies like they're handbags. Cute, but not meant to last." She didn't mention names. She didn't need to. Social media did the rest. Twitter lit up with speculation. TikTok creators began dissecting the footage frame by frame. Reddit threads exploded with side-by-side comparisons, timelines, and long-form analyses. Within a day, two names were being mentioned more than any others: Angelina Jolie and Blake Lively. The sentence came during a routine roundtable at a film industry summit, where Jolie had been invited to speak about longevity, influence, and the changing face of celebrity. The conversation was mild, until it wasn't. When asked how she felt about her legacy being interpreted or echoed by newer generations of actresses, Jolie paused. She gave a soft smile, then delivered the line like a velvet dagger. Calm, cool, cutting. It was only 12 words, but every single one hit like a freight train. Why did everyone assume she was talking about Blake Lively? The answer lies in months, maybe years, of subtle tension bubbling just beneath the surface. Though the two actresses have never shared a project or a public feud, their names have increasingly appeared together in tabloid rumors and industry chatter. The most persistent story? That Blake was circling a high-profile reboot of a franchise once made iconic by Jolie herself. While no official confirmation ever surfaced, reports of Blake attending quiet studio meetings and her team lobbying for the role made their rounds online. For Jolie fans, this felt like a provocation. The idea that Blake, charming, fashionable, and often cast as the next big thing, would dare step into Jolie's cinematic shoes struck a nerve. After all, Angelina wasn't just a star, she was a force, an Oscar winner, a director, a global humanitarian. She embodied the kind of gravitas Hollywood rarely sees twice. Blake, by contrast, was viewed by some critics as more style than substance. Beautiful? Yes. Charismatic? Sure. But a contender to Jolie's throne? That was a harder sell. So when Jolie made her remark, fans connected the dots instantly. The timing felt deliberate. The phrasing, unmistakable. She didn't just call someone out, she dismissed them entirely. In one sentence, she cast doubt on their staying power, their depth, their authenticity. It wasn't just shade, it was legacy warfare. Almost overnight, the online conversation took a turn. Jolie wasn't just trending, she was being praised. Users called the quote a masterclass in subtle savagery and the cleanest kill in Hollywood history. Memes surfaced showing Jolie sipping tea while chaos unfolded around her. One viral tweet read, "Angelina Jolie gave the most elegant execution of a clapback I've ever seen." But while some were celebrating, others were bristling. Blake Lively's fans pushed back, calling the comment unfair and unprovoked. They argued that Jolie was being territorial, petty even, and that the comparison was media-driven in the first place. Blake hadn't publicly expressed interest in replacing Jolie in anything, so why the drama? Still, there was no denying it. With one sentence, Angelina Jolie had reignited a conversation the internet didn't even realize it was waiting to have. And as her words continued to echo across platforms and headlines, one thing became clear. She wasn't just speaking to the room. She was sending a message, a quiet, devastating reminder of who she is and why she's not ready to be replaced. And as it turns out, that sentence was only the beginning. If Block 1 was the strike, Block 2 is the shockwave. Angelina Jolie's sentence had already sparked headlines, but the real explosion came in the reactions. Within 24 hours, her quote wasn't just viral, it was canonized. Media outlets published think pieces like, "Jolie's legacy line, the shade heard round the world." Influencers and podcasters couldn't stop replaying the clip, calling it a perfect storm of timing, tone, and tactical genius. Meanwhile, the internet had decided this wasn't just about Blake Lively, this was about power. But for many, it absolutely was about Blake. And the clues weren't hard to spot. Just days before Jolie's statement, Lively had quietly made waves by attending a high-profile industry dinner, wearing a black silk gown, nearly identical to Jolie's iconic look from the 2012 Oscars. Fans had commented on the similarity then, calling it homage or inspiration, but in hindsight, it looked more like foreshadowing. Jolie's quote felt less like a stray remark and more like a warning shot. And Blake, for the first time in years, found herself under a spotlight she didn't control. The starlet who had always managed to stay out of real controversy was suddenly at the center of a full-blown media narrative. Everyone wanted to know. Would she respond? Instead, what followed was silence. No posts, no interviews, no rebuttals. And that silence became part of the story. Some interpreted it as grace under pressure. Others saw it as damage control. But either way, the message was clear. Blake was rattled. Making matters worse, whispers from behind the scenes started slipping into the public sphere. Multiple insiders from the set of It Ends With Us, Blake's upcoming film with Justin Baldoni, began anonymously leaking details about on-set tension. Reports of creative disagreements, frequent reshoots, and heated exchanges painted a picture of a production in disarray. Whether or not the rumors were true didn't matter. The timing, stacked against Jolie's perfectly timed line, couldn't have been worse. While Blake's camp scrambled to get ahead of the spiraling narrative, Jolie stayed completely quiet. That silence only added to the mystique. She wasn't campaigning. She wasn't defending herself. She had simply spoken once and stepped back, letting the world do the rest. That restraint gave her even more power. It was the ultimate Hollywood flex. Say less, mean more. And then the endorsements started rolling in. Not formal ones, but subtle gestures that spoke volumes. Zendaya liked a tweet praising Jolie's graceful dismantling of the imitation game. Viola Davis shared an Instagram reel breaking down the legacy versus legacy cosplay dynamic, captioned with a single fire emoji. Even Margot Robbie was spotted wearing a vintage Angelina-style Saint Laurent trench just days later, igniting its own mini fashion frenzy. The fashion world chimed in too. Editors began writing pieces tracing Jolie's impact on red carpet aesthetics. Vogue called her a timeless blueprint of star power. Meanwhile, Blake's fashion choices, once considered iconic, were suddenly being reinterpreted as derivative. The pendulum had swung. What made all of this so fascinating wasn't just the celebrity gossip, it was the psychology. This was no longer just a spat between two actresses. It was a case study in image control, influence, and unspoken rules in an industry that thrives on perception. Jolie's move wasn't loud or messy, it was chess. And Blake, whether fairly or not, looked like she was playing checkers. By now, fans were obsessively tracing every past moment between the two. A resurfaced interview clip from 2018 showed Blake making a pointed comment about celebs who adopt causes for clout, which many now believe was a dig at Angelina's humanitarian work. Back then, the line had gone unnoticed. But in the wake of Jolie's quote, it took on new meaning. Was this a long, simmering feud finally boiling over? Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Jolie had flipped the narrative. For years, the media had painted her as elusive, closed off, or even obsolete. But now, with just 12 carefully chosen words, she had reclaimed the spotlight. Not with scandal, but with surgical precision. And still, she hadn't said another word. But the story was far from over. By the time the dust had barely started to settle, something else started to shift. And this time, it wasn't just fan chatter. Hollywood insiders began weighing in, and quietly, almost cautiously, the tone around Blake Lively started to change. It wasn't just about fashion anymore, it was about credibility. Within entertainment circles, the conversation wasn't just, did Angelina take a shot at Blake? It became, was she right? And that shift was dangerous. One subtle quote had planted doubt, and now that doubt was growing legs. Studio sources, speaking off record to industry blogs, began to reveal what had previously been whispered in corners, that Blake Lively was being positioned too aggressively as a new A-lister in the mold of Jolie, but the performances weren't sticking. One casting agent anonymously told a trade paper, "She's gorgeous, sure, she photographs well. But when you're asking who can carry gravitas like Jolie, that's not a name people throw out first." Then came the blind items. A popular gossip newsletter hinted that a major streaming platform had recently reconsidered a high-profile casting decision due to optics surrounding recent drama with a legacy actress. While no names were mentioned, comment sections made the connection instantly. This wasn't just petty celebrity beef anymore, it was beginning to look like career fallout. Meanwhile, Angelina Jolie remained almost monk-like in her silence. No follow-up comments, no Instagram stories, no clarifications. But ironically, it was that absence that made her more present than ever. Headlines continued to pop up daily. The art of the quiet comeback. How Angelina won the internet with 12 words. Jolie's legacy reclaimed without lifting a finger. She had gone from perceived recluse to public puppet master, without ever stepping back into the spotlight. The power dynamic between the two women couldn't have been clearer. While Blake was being analyzed, dissected, and fairly or not, criticized from every angle, Jolie was being mythologized. Her one sentence had turned her into a symbol, not just of longevity, but of restraint, of control, of calculated elegance. It wasn't long before fans dug up more fuel. A forgotten 2011 interview from Blake's Gossip Girl days resurfaced, in which she jokingly dismissed action roles as costume-heavy nonsense for Oscar-hungry types. Back then, it was brushed off as sarcasm. But now, people read it as a potential slight, especially since Jolie's career had been built, in part, on powerful, physically demanding roles like Tomb Raider and Salt. The narrative was practically writing itself. The media began framing the entire thing as a generational shift. Blake, once a beloved figure of millennial fashion and early 2010s rom-coms, was suddenly being seen as an echo, trying to wear a crown that hadn't yet been passed down. Meanwhile, Angelina was being reinterpreted as a reigning queen who had never abdicated in the first place. And then came the industry impact. One of Blake's upcoming endorsements, a luxury brand partnership announced months prior, was quietly removed from the company's press schedule. No explanation, no statement, just gone. Another campaign she had been rumored to lead was suddenly headlined by another actress, known more for indie dramas than red carpet flair. Publicists and brand reps were watching the story unfold, and they were making decisions. Meanwhile, Angelina's fashion label, Atelier Jolie, saw a measurable spike in media coverage and public interest. Web traffic surged, pre-orders increased. She hadn't posted about it, hadn't plugged a thing, but people were paying attention. And in Hollywood, attention is currency. More importantly, a very specific kind of buzz had returned around Jolie. Prestige, the kind of slow-burning admiration that doesn't rely on clickbait but on legacy, on weight, on relevance. And at the center of all this, one sentence, 12 words, no names, no insults, just a perfectly measured observation. And the ripple effects it caused were rewriting headlines, PR campaigns, and even power rankings across Hollywood. Blake Lively, once untouchable, now looked caught in a game she didn't know she was playing. And Angelina Jolie, she was playing it like a master, but even masters sometimes make their next move. In this game, it wasn't over yet. The story didn't end with Angelina's quiet power play. If anything, it evolved into something larger, something that transcended celebrity gossip and tapped into a bigger conversation about fame, legacy, and authenticity in Hollywood. Weeks after the initial quote, Blake Lively finally made her first public move, not with words, but with a statement through fashion. At a highly publicized charity gala, she appeared wearing a sleek black gown strikingly similar to one Angelina had famously worn in the early 2000s. The look was classic, minimalist, elegant, with a subtle smoky eye and restrained accessories. The press immediately noticed. Headlines blared, "Blake channels Angelina, again?" The internet exploded anew, wondering if it was homage, a statement, or something else entirely. Blake's fashion choice was a bold move. It said a lot without saying a word. Was it a peace offering, a show of respect, or a calculated attempt to step into the spotlight on her own terms? The ambiguity only added fuel to the fire. Social media divided between those who saw it as a graceful nod and others who called it a desperate attempt to reclaim relevance. Meanwhile, Hollywood's casting landscape began to subtly shift. Projects that had been rumored to favor younger, rising stars suddenly seemed to circle back toward veteran talents. Angelina's style, elegant, restrained, with a depth of experience, was in vogue again. Directors and producers reportedly expressed renewed interest in working with her, seeing in her a rare combination of star power and artistic credibility. What was happening wasn't just a comeback. It was a reminder of a truth that often gets lost in the celebrity churn. Legacy matters. Influence isn't just about being new or loud. It's about depth, longevity, and commanding respect, even without saying a word. Angelina had shown that with precision. One sentence, no follow-up needed. The silence that followed was its own statement, a demonstration of control in a world that often demands noise. On the other hand, Blake's more reactive moves, whether the fashion statement or later interviews attempting to clarify her side, sometimes felt like chasing a narrative she couldn't fully shape. The contrast between the two women's approaches highlighted something fundamental about fame itself, the difference between leading and reacting. Industry commentators started to write about this moment as a turning point in celebrity culture, a case study in power dynamics, reputation management, and the subtle art of influence. One popular entertainment columnist summed it up best. Angelina Jolie reminded us all that sometimes the strongest comeback isn't about shouting louder, but knowing exactly when to speak and when to let silence do the work. And the public? They were captivated. Whether Team Angelina or Team Blake, millions watched as a single sentence rippled outward, changing careers, conversations, and perceptions. But beyond the intrigue and drama, the story raised larger questions about Hollywood itself. How much of what we see is performance? How do legacy and reinvention coexist? And when the spotlight shifts, who truly holds the crown? For now, Angelina Jolie's one-liner remains iconic, not just for its shade, but for what it represented. A masterclass in power, poise, and timing. As for Blake Lively, the future is still unwritten. Hollywood moves fast, and careers are resilient. She'll find her path, no doubt. But for this chapter, her story will always be tied to that moment, when one sentence changed everything. And as viewers, all we can do is watch, because in Hollywood, the next move is never far away. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's hottest drama, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest celebrity stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think really won this silent battle? Stay tuned for more insider secrets and shocking reveals.